An arrogant CEO publicly mocked a black woman he assumed was just a cleaner during a heated court case. What he didn't realize was that beneath her cleaner's uniform was a brilliant legal mind. Justice was about to be served. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on where you're watching from. Let's get started. They say a court of law is the ultimate equalizer, but in the heart of Millburn City, it was often a stage for the powerful to show off just how untouchable they believed themselves to be. No one embodied that arrogance more completely than Everett Langford, the CEO of Lumitech Industries. He was a figure of polished suits and immeasurable wealth, a man whose every entrance commanded hushes and stares. Yet behind the curated image lay an unyielding contempt for those who didn't fit his vision of success. Everett believed power was his birthright, and anyone who challenged him was either laughable or invisible. That day, Courtroom 9 was overflowing with tension. Spectators and minor media outlets gathered in the aisles, their eyes shifting from the polished, walnut-paneled walls to the broad back of the man seated at the defendant's table. Everett's posture exuded confidence, back straight, chin lifted, an aura that declared, "I own this place." Even the uniformed bailiff gave him a wide berth, unwilling to risk any confrontation with a billionaire whose influence reached into every corner of the city's bureaucracy. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, one small-time blogger whispered into her phone, trying to capture the moment. If you're enjoying these daily updates on local scandals, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. A few seats away sat a woman whose silent composure contrasted starkly with the energy swirling around her. She wore a simple navy blue skirt and jacket, her natural hair styled neatly in a low bun. People who didn't know better assumed she was a junior clerk, or possibly an intern tasked with note-taking. She had no visible entourage, no press, and no anxious attorneys hovering to check her comfort. However, every so often her dark eyes flicked toward Everett with a calm, penetrating gaze, as though sizing him up. Her name was Selina Hammond, and to the uninitiated observer, she might have been a nobody. If they'd spotted her a week earlier, wearing a janitorial uniform and pushing a cleaning cart through the hallways of Lumitech's corporate tower, they would have believed it was her only identity. A black cleaner in a world of sleek suits and private jets, people like Everett never paused to wonder if she had greater ambitions. Yet she'd come here not as a mere spectator, but as the plaintiff in the lawsuit that had captured the city's attention in hushed side conversations. After all, no one openly declared war on Everett Langford unless they'd lost their mind or possessed some serious hidden leverage. The official reason for the day's hearing was fairly mundane on paper: workplace harassment, wrongful termination, defamation of character. But rumor had it that the entire affair had become personal the moment Everett set eyes on Selina months ago. She was a new hire in the cleaning staff, assigned to the executive floors to keep them polished. According to co-workers, her cleaning was impeccable, but she rarely bantered or shared personal details. She simply did her job and left. Yet one morning, while wiping down the glass walls of the corridor leading to Everett's office, she'd overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. It involved bribes, hush money, and a threat to bury a competitor by any means necessary. Selina's ears pricked at the words, but she kept her composure. It was a skill she'd honed long before she ever set foot inside Lumitech's doors. She'd planned to remain inconspicuous, to gather more information, then quietly alert someone with the power to investigate. But Everett, with his sixth sense for perceived threats, spotted her. He'd watched her scurry away with her mop bucket and decided to make an example out of her. "He fired me on the spot," Selina had told an employment board arbitrator in the early days, her voice steady but strained. "Said I was incompetent, a nuisance, even called me..." unspeakable names. Those unspeakable names were coded in the hearing transcript as racially charged slurs, though few dared to repeat them aloud. But Everett hadn't merely fired her. He'd humiliated her in front of an entire boardroom of executives, making sure everyone saw her as a worthless figure who could be disposed of with a single wave of his hand. That might have been the end of it, if not for Selina's next move. She marched to the Labor Commission, lodged complaints, and demanded an investigation. It turned out Everett had made a crucial error that day. He never checked her background. He'd never have guessed that the quiet cleaner who seemed to vanish into corners carried a wealth of knowledge and a fierce drive, honed through years of legal study. She had a law degree, and though her admission to the bar was on hold, personal financial struggles had prevented her from practicing. She understood the system in ways a typical cleaning staffer wouldn't. Across the room, Everett reclined in his seat, drumming his manicured fingertips on the polished table, feigning boredom. He hadn't even bothered to bring high-profile counsel. Representing him was a fresh-faced junior associate from a firm known for brutal corporate defense strategies. It was as though Everett believed victory was so inevitable he could send a minion to do the grunt work. Selina noticed everything: the shift in the gallery's mood, the sneering glances, and the underlying tension that accompanied any matter involving this powerful CEO. She reminded herself that she wasn't alone in this fight. Behind her calm exterior was an unshakable resolve built from a lifetime of facing obstacles, racial prejudice, financial hardship, personal setbacks. This lawsuit wasn't merely about her. It was about challenging an entire culture of impunity that men like Everett flaunted. "All rise," came the bailiff's call. Judge Caroline Fletcher, a middle-aged woman with a firm yet open demeanor, took her place on the bench. She swept her gaze across the courtroom, eyes pausing a fraction of a second on Selina, then continuing until they settled on Everett. The faintest flicker of disapproval crossed the judge's face, but her voice held no bias when she spoke. "Be seated. We're here for the pretrial motions in Hammond versus Langford. Counsel, please identify yourselves." Everett's junior associate rose, introduced himself in a crisp, memorized line. Then came a small pause. Selina rose without fanfare and introduced herself with quiet confidence. A murmur spread through the gallery. She was representing herself. The expression on Everett's face was priceless, a mix of condescension and smug amusement. His lips twisted, and he gave an imperceptible shake of his head, as though mocking the idea that a mere cleaner dared to stand in a court of law to challenge him. Judge Fletcher nodded, though her expression revealed curiosity. "Ms. Hammond, you're certain you want to act as your own counsel in this matter?" "Yes, Your Honor," Selina replied. "I have sufficient legal background and experience with civil procedure to manage my case." Everett's associate smirked, but said nothing. The judge turned her attention to the pre-trial motions. The usual arguments ensued. The defense sought to dismiss certain evidence that Selina claimed pointed to racially discriminatory practices and intimidation. Selina calmly cited precedents and laws that allowed such evidence if it established a pattern of abuse within the workplace. Each time Everett's attorney tried to run circles around her, she parried with succinct references to case law and statutory language. The judge seemed impressed. Then, halfway through the proceedings, it happened. One of the defense's lines of argument tried to paint Selina as incompetent, intellectually unsophisticated, and prone to misinterpretations. They brandished her job title as if it were proof of an inferior mind. Everett himself leaned forward, a cruel grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That's what this is all about," he interjected at one point, ignoring his attorney's cautioning glance. A disgruntled employee, if we can even call her that, who overheard words she didn't understand. She latched onto the wild notion of some conspiracy. Her claims are baseless, Your Honor. Selina raised her chin. With respect, Mr. Langford, I understand far more than you think. For one, I know the definition of defamation, and the numerous times you belittled my intelligence in front of your staff certainly contributed to a hostile work environment. Oh, please. Everett made a dismissive gesture. Don't pretend you can speak on the law as if you're trained. You're a janitor. Stick to your mops. A hush fell over the courtroom. Judge Fletcher's eyes narrowed slightly. Even the defense attorney looked uncomfortable at his client's outburst. But Selina remained poised, her voice unwavering. I'd appreciate it if you'd address me with respect, as is proper in this setting. And for the record, Mr. Langford, I have a law degree from Maxwell University, graduated with honors. She let the statement hang in the silent air. I chose to work in cleaning to support my mother's medical bills and pay off some debts before taking the bar. You see, I have a responsibility to my family. Everett froze. For the first time, the mask of condescension slipped, replaced by genuine shock. The gallery erupted in whispers, and even the junior associate representing him seemed stunned. He glanced from Selina to Everett, uncertain if he should intervene. The judge cleared her throat, bringing order back to the room. Ms. Hammond, she said, this court has no objection to a plaintiff with legal training representing herself. If your credentials are as stated, you're within your rights. Selina simply nodded, but she felt the tension in her chest loosen slightly. She'd kept that part of her life hidden, preferring to let the court see her as an ordinary person standing up for justice. But she realized that exposing her qualifications was the only way to break Everett's attempt to dismiss her as beneath him. The dramatic shift in the atmosphere confirmed it had been the right move. Not missing a beat, Selina continued. Your Honor, I believe we were discussing motions in limine. The defense wants to exclude certain documents I obtained before my termination. I argue that these documents show patterns of harassment across the company. Everett's lawyer tried to regain footing, but the damage was done. The revelation of Selina's legal background changed the entire tenor of the proceedings. No longer could they paint her as an uneducated bystander. The hush around them deepened. Even the blogger who'd been discreetly recording the session whispered excitedly into her phone, "This is huge. The plaintiff just revealed she's actually a law graduate." Langford looks rattled. This is a turning point, folks. Judge Fletcher reviewed the request to exclude evidence. Her gaze flicked from the defense attorney to Selina. I'll need time to review the specifics, but preliminary inclination is to allow evidence that might indicate a broader corporate culture. I'll issue a written decision next week. A quick rap of the gavel signaled the session's close for the day. As the bailiff announced recess, Everett stood with a harsh scrape of his chair on the tiled floor. His face was rigid. Without sparing Selina another glance, he stalked toward the exit, ignoring the handful of reporters hovering near the door. His attorney scrambled to keep up. Selina exhaled, shoulders sagging with relief. The first battle was over, and though the war was far from won, she'd landed a blow that struck Everett right where it hurt, his ego. She gathered her documents, ignoring the curious stares from onlookers. This was only the beginning. Outside, the corridor was alive with speculation. Everyone wanted a piece of Selina, but she simply walked past them, offering no comments. Today's victory would spread quickly, and Everett's humiliation would be the talk of every legal column by nightfall. Yet beneath her calm exterior, Selina was bracing for the battles ahead. She knew how men like Everett operated. He would stop at nothing to preserve his empire and trample anyone who threatened it. Still, as she stepped into the crisp afternoon sunlight, she felt a sense of purpose burning in her chest. She refused to let intimidation crush her. Whatever Everett threw her way, she had more than a mop in her arsenal. She had the law on her side and a clear conscience guiding her pursuit of justice. The moment she stepped out into the early evening air, Selina felt a swirl of eyes upon her. Some were from concerned bystanders who had heard murmurs of the case, others from curious reporters who smelled a story. As she clutched her legal folder and headed down the courthouse steps, she caught sight of a sleek black sedan idling at the curb. The tinted window slid down with a hum, revealing Everett Langford's attorney inside, beckoning her over with a stiff nod. She hesitated only a second before walking over. The young man in the passenger seat, whose nameplate in court read Zachary Alden, leaned out. "Ms. Hammond, I'd like a word. Could we offer you a ride?" He tried to sound genial, but she detected the tension in his voice. "Thank you, but I'll pass on the ride," she replied. "I have things to do." He glanced at the driver, who stared straight ahead, unblinking. "Look, it would be helpful if you could spare 5 minutes, strictly off the record." Selina studied the attorney's expression. She didn't see obvious contempt, only a hungry desperation. Possibly Everett had unleashed a flurry of demands after realizing she was more than a low-level employee. "Off the record?" she repeated. "I doubt anything connected to your client is truly off the record." Alden pressed his lips into a firm line. "We can at least talk where it's quiet." He gestured behind him to an empty stretch of sidewalk away from the reporters who were inching closer. Selina nodded, following him until they stood near a row of parked cars out of earshot. "I'll keep this brief," he began, voice low. "Mr. Langford believes today's hearing might have escalated things unnecessarily. He wants to avoid negative publicity. If you're interested, we might discuss a settlement." She arched a brow. "You mean hush money?" He looked genuinely pained. "Please don't call it that. Settlements are common in civil disputes. You've made your point. You're obviously capable. Let's avoid dragging both sides through a protracted trial. You'll be compensated, and we can all move on." She clasped the folder against her chest. "What's the figure?" Alden shifted on his polished shoes. "He authorized me to begin at $300,000, tax-free immediate wire transfer plus an NDA. That's substantial, Ms. Hammond." Selina considered it. In her quiet moments, she'd imagined a scenario exactly like this. Money that could solve her family's debts, pay off her mother's medical bills, let her finally take the bar exam, and buy them a decent home. But the memory of Everett's scorn and the knowledge of what she'd overheard in that corridor made her pause. He wasn't merely a boss who mistreated an employee. He was a man who believed his wealth could cover any sin. "Not interested," she said, measuring each word. "Tell your client I'm not selling the truth. He can keep his money." Alden's jaw clenched. "I suspect that refusal might not sit well with him." "I have no doubt. Good night, Mr. Alden." She turned on her heel and began walking away. Over her shoulder, she heard the sedan's door open, possibly so Alden could relay the bad news to his waiting boss. Selina didn't look back. She found a city bus stop a couple blocks down, ignoring the persistent eyes of bystanders who recognized her from earlier press coverage. By the time she reached her small apartment, a wave of exhaustion set in, but she knew rest wouldn't come easily. She shed her jacket, draping it over a worn chair, and sank onto the couch. Bills lay stacked on the chipped coffee table. She stared at them, thinking of that 6-figure settlement offer. For a moment, guilt twisted in her stomach. Could she justify turning down so much money when every day her mother's condition worsened? Closing her eyes, she relived that humiliating scene in Everett's office. He had shouted those ugly words in front of colleagues, then threatened that no one would ever believe a janitor's nonsense. It wasn't only about her pride or her future law career. It was about standing up for a principle, that no one, no matter their wealth, should belittle someone else's humanity. And if that meant a longer war, she'd bear the cost. She forced herself to review the notes from court, summarizing the judge's responses to each motion, A friend from her law school days, Anita Burgess, had left a voicemail wishing her luck. Maybe Selena would call her tomorrow, see if Anita could assist pro bono. Still, the primary strategy would remain in Selena's hands. She alone knew the extent of what she'd witnessed at Lumitech. She alone had the nerve to confront Everett in open court. That night, she fell into a restless sleep, her dreams haunted by echoing slurs and the gleam of corporate suits under fluorescent lights. She woke before dawn, determined to keep forging ahead. Early the next morning, Selena arrived at the offices of a small but respected law firm recommended by Anita. The interior was modest, nothing like the marble atriums and modern art sculptures at the big corporate firms, but it felt welcoming. She introduced herself to the managing partner, a straight-talking woman named Corinne Hayes. "I'm not in a position to hire counsel," Selena said, "but I'd value a brief consult. I have a law degree, but I want a second opinion." Corinne tapped a pen against a yellow notepad. "Your lawsuit's already rattling the city's elite. You're sure you want to keep representing yourself?" "It's the best route for me right now, but I won't refuse honest advice." Corinne nodded. "I've read about this. Your case has merit, especially if you can show a pattern of racial or discriminatory harassment. But you're up against a man with nearly limitless resources." Selena swallowed. "I know, but if I win, the precedent could be huge. So many workers have been bullied and tossed aside by people like him. I want to shine a light on that." Corinne admired her conviction. "Well, the legal path is clear enough. Gather evidence, secure witnesses, and remain unflappable in court. Everett's people will try every trick, discrediting your background, painting you as vindictive. Expect that." She nodded. "I'm prepared." Before Selena left, Corinne offered a handshake and a final piece of advice. "Don't underestimate your own story. Juries respond to authenticity. You tell them who you are, why you did what you did. They'll listen." Afterward, Selena hurried to meet a reporter from a local newspaper. He'd contacted her about the allegations of intimidation she'd already faced. For a moment, she deliberated whether to give a statement. Part of her wanted to remain quiet, let the legal process speak. But the other part recalled how swiftly corporate machines can bury the truth without public scrutiny. Maybe shining a bit of light on Everett's intimidation attempts would discourage him from intensifying them further. They met in a corner cafe. The reporter, a wiry man named DeMarcus Fong, set his recorder on the table with a simple question. "Is it true you declined a settlement from Langford?" Selena sipped her coffee. If he wanted to correct the situation, he could start by admitting wrongdoing. But hush money won't fix the culture he's cultivated. "Sources say you have a law degree but were working as a cleaner. Care to explain?" "There's nothing to explain," she said, unruffled. "I had personal responsibilities, medical expenses, debts. Cleaning jobs are honest work. It doesn't make me any less intelligent or any less worthy of respect. That's a lesson people like Mr. Langford need to learn." DeMarcus grinned, impressed. "Do you think you can actually win?" She leaned forward. "I wouldn't have filed if I didn't. And it's not just about winning. It's about exposing how money and privilege can't be a license to mistreat people." They spoke for 20 minutes, covering everything from corporate accountability to racial discrimination in high-powered workplaces. Finally, DeMarcus turned off his recorder. "This city's been waiting for someone to stand up to him. If you succeed, you'll send a message." Selena rose, thanked him, and left. She knew the interview would provoke Everett, but she refused to cower. Soon enough, she'd see the consequences of that choice. Sure enough, by midday, the local news site ran a headline: "Janitor-turned-law graduate challenges billionaire, settlement offer rejected." Selena spotted it while scanning her phone. The article included quotes from her interview, focusing on her refusal to accept a payout. Underneath, A slew of comments ranged from supportive to skeptical. Some trolls mocked her for turning down money she should have been grateful to get. Others praised her bravery. That evening, as she sorted through her notes at home, her phone buzzed. The number was blocked. She almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. She answered, and a distorted voice said, "Think you're brave? Keep pushing, and you'll regret it." Then the line went dead. Her hands shook. She'd anticipated threats, but hearing one directly rattled her. Still, she steadied her breath, refusing to let fear define her. She scrolled through her contacts and dialed a direct line to a detective she'd met while volunteering at a legal clinic. She explained the call, asked for advice, and he assured her they'd open a file on potential harassment. He encouraged her to document every instance. The next day's hearing was less dramatic, purely procedural. Selena sat quietly in the gallery, waiting to argue her motion to compel certain documents from Lumitech's HR department. Everett wasn't present. His attorney, Alden, approached her with a neutral expression. This time, there was no mention of settlements. Instead, he whispered that all her discovery requests would be thoroughly challenged. She responded by handing him a copy of her motion, highlighting references to relevant labor statutes. If he'd hoped to spook her, he'd learn quickly that intimidation no longer worked. While they waited, Selena overheard two paralegals chatting near the aisle. "I can't believe she turned him down," one said. "I mean, that sum was life-changing." "I guess dignity isn't for sale," the other replied, eyes flicking toward her. Selena felt a quiet affirmation. Dignity, yes. That was what this entire fight was truly about. She might be scrubbing floors again if she lost, but no sum of money could ever buy her self-respect. She refused to be just another victim who vanished under the weight of hush money and NDAs. That afternoon, the judge granted her motion to compel, forcing Lumitech to release certain internal emails and documents related to complaints of harassment. Selena's pulse quickened at the thought of reading those files. If they contained references to how Everett spoke of her, particularly regarding race or any threat he'd issued, she'd have proof of the toxic environment. When the hearing ended, Selena stepped into the hallway feeling cautious hope. She could already see Everett's side bristling, sifting through excuses to stall, but the court order was official, and they couldn't ignore it. Tomorrow, she told herself, would be another day of pitched battles. She had no illusions that Everett would back off easily. If anything, he'd fight harder. But with each small victory, she reminded herself who she was standing up for. The workers who came in early and stayed late, who never got credit, who listened quietly when executives sneered. This case was for them as much as it was for her. A day later, an envelope arrived at Selena's apartment with Lumitech's return address stamped in neat black text. Inside were the first sets of HR documents the judge had compelled them to release, though she suspected it was only a fraction of what actually existed. The entire stack fit into a slim manila folder, prompting a skeptical frown as she laid it out on her small kitchen table. She took a careful breath, cleared her mind, and began reading. Predictably, the folder contained a handful of incident reports, all thoroughly sanitized. She found references to workplace conflicts, but every complainant's name was blacked out, along with any specifics that might pin blame on a superior. One record caught her attention. It mentioned repeated use of disparaging language and a direct confrontation with an executive. Yet the place where the executive's name should have appeared was obliterated under a large black rectangle. "They're deliberately stonewalling," Selena muttered. Without question, Everett's lawyers had combed through these documents and redacted anything that could be damaging to his case. The judge's order required them to turn over relevant files, but apparently no one had spelled out how thorough or unredacted they had to be. That detail, she realized, might prompt another legal motion. But not every detail had been properly erased. In a corner of a page about an elevated tone of voice complaint, a typed line read, "Personal meeting Warshu E.L." N. Rogers witnessed. Selina's heart skipped. E.L. could only mean Everett Langford himself. N. Rogers must be the witness. If she could track down that person, maybe they could confirm that Everett himself had addressed certain staff members with insults or worse. She gathered her notes and decided to investigate. The name Rogers appeared on 2 separate redacted documents, each referencing employees who complained of discriminatory remarks. After rummaging through older personal notes, she recalled an email chain she'd saved from a colleague. It had included a mention of an HR manager named Nicole Rogers. The puzzle pieces fit together. Without delay, Selina pulled out her phone to see if LinkedIn or a standard web search might yield something. Sure enough, Nicole Rogers, Senior HR Specialist, Lumitech, popped up in a result, complete with a corporate headshot, a woman with a tentative smile and curly hair pinned back. The listing showed she'd worked there for 4 years but had recently gone on leave. On leave? That might be code for forced out. Or maybe she was stepping away from a system she couldn't tolerate. Selina suspected there was more to it. She jotted down details, then fired off a polite professional email to the address she found, requesting a conversation. While waiting for any reply, Selina returned to court for another hearing. This time it involved her request for more extensive discovery. Internal memos, emails among executives, and chat logs. She'd titled the request with explicit references to case law that prevented over-redaction of relevant materials. If Lumitech's side wanted to hide behind black ink, they'd soon face her argument in front of Judge Fletcher. In the narrow hallway outside the courtroom, she caught sight of a few reporters loitering. DeMarcus was among them, waving cheerfully. Another was a tall woman from a cable news channel who called out, "Ms. Hammond, any comment on the partial document release?" Selina paused, scanning the hallway to ensure Everett wasn't lurking. "Yes," she said calmly. "I believe their submissions are incomplete. We'll be requesting full compliance." Then, with a tight smile, she pivoted and walked into the courtroom. Everett hadn't shown again, but Zachary Alden stood at the defense table, posture tense. They exchanged minimal greetings. When the judge took the bench, Selina presented her arguments. "Your Honor, the documents my opposing party provided are substantially redacted. I contend that the redacted portions are relevant to establishing a pattern of harassment by Mr. Langford." Alden tried to counter. "We've complied to the best of our ability under confidentiality guidelines. The redactions protect the privacy of individuals who aren't part of this suit." Selina calmly tapped her notes. Privacy can be respected without concealing the identity of the very people who may have witnessed harassment. We have the name Nicole Rogers partially visible, which suggests the process of redaction was arbitrary. If the material is relevant, it must be fully disclosed. Judge Fletcher nodded gravely, glancing at the documents. "Mr. Alden, I see large swaths of black ink over these lines. This is more than minimal privacy protection. I'm inclined to order a revised set of disclosures with narrower redactions." Alden's cheeks reddened. "We'll comply, Your Honor, within reason." Satisfied for the moment, Selina returned to her seat. One small victory led to the next. She sensed the frustration from Lumitech's legal side mounting. She'd have to stay vigilant. Cornered animals lash out. That night, her phone beeped with an unexpected email. Subject line, "Re-HR meeting." From Nicole Rogers. Heart-pounding, Selina opened it. "Hello, Selina. I left Lumitech 2 months ago. I know exactly what you're up against. I can't speak freely on company property, but I'm willing to meet off-site. Let's talk soon." Nicole relief washed over her. The next morning, they agreed to meet at a quiet diner off the freeway, far from Lumitech's corporate district. Selena arrived early, claiming a corner booth under flickering fluorescent lights. She kept an eye on the entrance, unsure what to expect. When a slim woman in a gray blazer walked in, scanning nervously, Selena waved her over. Nicole took a seat, her posture rigid with tension. "I recognize you," she said softly, smiling without mirth. "I saw you around the top floor a few times, cleaning, but we never spoke." Selena nodded. "You were in HR. I guess you were overseeing certain complaint files." "Yes, and I noticed that every time someone raised a specific issue, especially about Mr. Langford's language or behavior, it got hushed. The standard line was, 'We'll handle it internally.' But nothing changed. In fact, the employees who complained often ended up leaving one way or another." Nicole's face showed genuine remorse. She fiddled with the menu, not meeting Selena's eyes. "I tried to help people discreetly. Sometimes I'd slip them resources or an attorney's phone number. But eventually upper management caught on. I was reprimanded for acting outside my scope." "How did you end up leaving?" Selena asked. Nicole sighed. "I wrote a memo detailing patterns of harassment and recommended a full third-party investigation. 3 days later, I was placed on leave, told it was for stress. They offered me a severance if I resigned. I refused to sign their NDA, so I never got the payout." A beat of silence passed as they shared a moment of recognition. Both had stood against the same power structure. "And now?" Selena prompted. "I work part-time at a nonprofit. Pays less, but I can sleep at night." Nicole reached into her purse and removed a flash drive. "This might help. I copied certain files before they escorted me out. They aren't official in the sense of being validated by legal, but they show original complaint entries before they got edited." Heart-pounding, Selena carefully took the flash drive. "I can't thank you enough. This is risky." Nicole shrugged. "I'm done living in fear. I saw how they treated employees like you. Actually, I remember your file. You had no major infractions. Then suddenly, you were written up for insubordination and dismissed. It was so obviously retaliatory, but no one would speak up." They paused to order coffee and sandwiches, then resumed talking in low voices. Nicole filled in details about how HR staff were often instructed to bury complaints involving top executives. They'd say, "Mr. Langford's just expressing his passion. Don't interpret it too literally." But we knew what it was: disrespect and prejudice. After they finished the meal, Nicole looked around, still anxious. "I'll likely be subpoenaed. They'll try to discredit me, say I'm a disgruntled ex-employee, but I'll testify if needed." Selena's eyes brimmed with gratitude. "Thank you. You could make a real difference. If the court sees your testimony plus these files, that might confirm a systemic culture of discrimination." They exchanged contact information. Before departing, Nicole looked Selena straight in the eye. "I've seen many people walk away out of fear or desperation. I admire your resolve. Don't let them break you." After she left, Selena sat in the booth a moment longer, wrapping her mind around this new evidence. Perhaps she finally had the missing puzzle pieces that would show the judge, and possibly a jury, just how toxic Lumitex's executive offices truly were. She went straight home, plugged the flash drive into her laptop, and scrolled through the folder. The raw complaint data from Lumitex's internal system appeared, along with timestamps, typed statements, and even references to direct quotes from managers. She spotted a line reading, "Employee states E. Langford used slur. Supervisor claims taken out of context." Another complaint described Langford screaming at an administrative assistant who'd brought the wrong brand of coffee. Yet another referenced intimidation with statements like, "You're lucky to have a job and no one will believe you." Her adrenaline surged. This was precisely the pattern she needed to establish. Combined with testimonies from employees who'd left or been forced out, She could construct an unassailable argument that Everett's abuse wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that targeted underrepresented employees, especially black workers. Yet as she read, her phone chimed, 2 new voicemails. The first was from Detective Abrams, who told her no new leads had surfaced on the blocked caller, but he urged her to remain vigilant. The second message, a raspy voice dripping with menace, declared, "Enjoy your illusions of victory, Ms. Hammond. You'll regret it soon enough." Her chest tightened. Fear warred with determination. She realized that with every step closer to exposing Lumitech's wrongdoing, Everett's allies or hired goons might escalate their harassment. She could run, or she could stand firm. The choice was obvious. The next morning, she arrived at the courthouse clutching a few freshly printed pages from Nicole's files. She planned to amend her complaint to reflect the new evidence. DeMarcus spotted her on the steps, waving a small camera. "Ms. Hammond, rumor says you've got new documents. Care to comment?" She slowed, giving him a measured stare. "I won't reveal specifics just yet, but I can confirm that additional material has come to light. Let's just say it's not looking good for Mr. Langford's attempts to deny wrongdoing." As the crowd of onlookers pressed closer, she spotted Zachary Alden approaching in a swirl of tension. His expression signaled he'd heard the rumor. She braced for what came next. "Ms. Hammond," he said stiffly, "I strongly advise caution about publicly discussing these materials. We don't want to escalate a discovery dispute." She held his gaze. "I'm well within my rights to mention that relevant documents exist. If Lumitech wants to question their authenticity, they can do so in court." He opened his mouth, perhaps to retort, but then snapped it shut. Without another word, he turned and hurried inside. Selina suppressed a wry smile, heading up the marble steps. She could feel the electricity in the air. Everett's side knew she wasn't bluffing anymore. If they'd viewed her as a nuisance before, they now faced the reality that she possessed evidence that could upend the entire facade of Lumitech's pristine reputation. This was exactly what she needed, a reason for the system to stop ignoring her voice. She'd soon see whether it was enough to take Everett down. Inside the courthouse's buzzing corridors, Selina marched toward the clerk's office. She carried a neatly bound motion to amend her complaint, a document referencing the incriminating files Nicole Rogers had shared. Dressed in a charcoal blazer and skirt, she felt more composed than she ever had wearing a suit. Perhaps it was the sense of purpose. Perhaps it was the knowledge that for once she wasn't standing alone. She filed the amended complaint swiftly, then paused in a quieter hallway to text Nicole. "Just submitted new motion. Evidence might shake things up. Thank you again." With that done, she stepped back out into the main lobby, where the muted thunder of voices greeted her. Lawyers, litigants, and staff milled about. She spotted Zachary Alden conferring with 2 other suits near a potted fern. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp navy suit, noticed her and arched an eyebrow. Someone new, perhaps another high-powered attorney brought in to reinforce Everett's defense. She refused to be intimidated. Instead, she walked straight to courtroom 9, where a brief hearing on scheduling awaited. According to the docket, Judge Fletcher wanted to address how soon the case could move to depositions and potential trial dates. Even from outside, Selina heard the low hum of conversation. The watchers who had followed the story since her first hearing drifted in and out, whispering about a showdown. A few recognized her and stepped aside, granting a path as though she were royalty. The irony of that didn't escape her. Inside, she found her usual seat near the plaintiff's table. Everett once again was conspicuously absent. Instead, his chair was occupied by the new arrival in the navy suit. He had the air of a more seasoned litigator than Alden. Noticing her, he bent slightly in greeting, a gesture that almost mimicked politeness. When she offered the same dip of her head, he murmured, "James Belden, senior partner at Groves, Marks & Foreman. Pleased to meet you, Ms. Hammond." She recognized the name of that firm immediately. They were known for defending CEOs in multi-million-dollar class actions, making lawsuits vanish through labyrinthine legal arguments. She nodded, keeping her voice level. "I see Mr. Langford decided he needed bigger guns." Belden pressed his lips into a faint smile. "Our firm was retained only recently. Mr. Langford wants this resolved efficiently." Selina set her briefcase down. "Efficiently or quietly?" He did not answer. His cool, dark eyes suggested he was assessing every angle: her posture, her confidence, the meticulously prepared motion in her hand. She was sure he'd devoured every detail of her life story, searching for weaknesses. The bailiff called for order, and Judge Fletcher entered promptly, sitting with an air of no-nonsense business. After calling the case, she glanced around. "I see we have new counsel for Mr. Langford. Kindly state your appearance." Belden rose. "James Belden for the defendant, along with my associate, Mr. Alden." He remained standing as the judge nodded. "Very well," she said. "We're here to discuss scheduling. Ms. Hammond, you recently moved to amend your complaint to include new documents. I've received them this morning." Selina stood. "That's correct, Your Honor. I discovered evidence that strongly suggests a pattern of behavior, specifically repeated harassment and intimidation by Mr. Langford. This evidence expands my claims." Judge Fletcher pursed her lips thoughtfully. "And the defense's position?" Belden answered with a poised tone. "We contest the authenticity of the so-called evidence. We also believe the allegations remain in large part unsupported. I intend to move for a protective order limiting discovery. We won't let unvetted documents smear my client's reputation." Selina inhaled calmly. "These documents are from an internal HR system at Lumitech, Your Honor. Their authenticity isn't in question." He interrupted. "We dispute the chain of custody. The files may have been obtained illegally." Judge Fletcher's gaze ping-ponged between them. "We'll address the admissibility. For now, Ms. Hammond has the right to amend. Let's talk scheduling. Assuming the amended complaint stands, we'll set a deposition timeline." She began flipping through a calendar. "Ms. Hammond, how soon can you be ready to depose witnesses?" "I'd like depositions to begin within 3 weeks, Your Honor," Selina replied. "Given that many of these individuals still work at Lumitech or recently left, time is of the essence." Belden's jaw tightened. "We'll need more time, at least 2 months. We have many demands on our docket, and my client is a high-level executive with international obligations." An almost imperceptible flash of annoyance crossed the judge's face. "Mr. Belden, I understand your firm has multiple clients, but this court sees no reason to grant an extraordinary delay, especially given the plaintiff's plausible claims. I'm inclined to compromise. We'll set depositions to start in 5 weeks. That should allow you to coordinate scheduling." He managed a tight nod. "Understood. As to the motion for a protective order you mentioned, you can file it. We'll have a hearing if necessary, but I warn you now, Mr. Belden, I don't tolerate frivolous attempts to conceal relevant material." "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his expression inscrutable. Judge Fletcher tapped her pen. "Then we're set. Ms. Hammond, anything else?" Selina considered mentioning the threats she'd received, but decided that belonged in a separate discussion with law enforcement. "Not at this time, Your Honor." "Very well. Court is adjourned." A sharp rap of the gavel ended the session. The gallery's subdued chatter resumed as people stood. Selina gathered her papers, feeling the weight of Belden's gaze. When she turned, he spoke in a near whisper. "Ms. Hammond, a moment?" She stepped aside from the passing crowd. "Yes?" His voice had a low intensity. "I'd prefer we keep this civil. We don't want a media circus. The longer this drags on, the more difficult it is for both parties. I'll present a settlement, a legitimate one if you're open to it." Selina lifted her chin. "I've already turned down your client's offer once." "I'm aware. I'm talking about a more significant figure plus certain concessions. Possibly a letter of apology from Mr. Langford." He said it neutrally, though the idea of Everett apologizing sounded absurd. She recalled the hush money Alden had dangled. "You're welcome to send me any proposal in writing, but if it requires a gag order or NDA that keeps the truth hidden, I'm not interested." His slight hesitation betrayed surprise. Many plaintiffs, especially those with limited finances, would leap at a bigger payout. "You'd consider a settlement without a gag order?" Selina gave him a steady look. "I'm not letting Everett bury his behavior. An apology is meaningless if it's sealed away. Should you craft a settlement that includes transparency, fairness, and accountability, I'll read it. But I doubt your client will agree." Belden exhaled. "We'll see. Good day, Ms. Hammond." She left the courthouse feeling the push and pull intensify. Everett had hired a top-tier defense lawyer, but that same lawyer now dangled bigger settlement hints. It meant they feared the outcome if the case reached a jury. She clenched her folder tighter, her determination growing. Outside, she spotted DeMarcus Fong again, scribbling in his notepad. He asked a few pointed questions about the new scheduling order. She offered non-committal answers. "We'll move forward with depositions. That's all I can say." Before heading home, she swung by a modest second-floor walk-up where one of her old law school friends, Anita Burgess, worked as a solo practitioner. Together they pored over a quick outline for depositions, which staff members to subpoena, how to handle recalcitrant witnesses, and ways to preserve crucial testimony in case anyone disappeared or was pressured into silence. "If you subpoena Nicole Rogers, it might blow open the entire HR cover-up," Anita observed, tapping her pen. "That's huge, but you should be prepared for them to challenge her credibility." Selina nodded. "I'll have to show that her documents align with official versions once we force Lumitech to unredact everything. She's ready to testify, but I don't want to put her at risk." Anita gave a small, encouraging smile. "At least you'll have a powerful narrative. An HR insider forced out for trying to do the right thing. Juries respond to that kind of story, especially if you combine it with your own experiences." They stayed up late discussing strategy, citing relevant rules. Once or twice, Selina had to remind herself she no longer needed to hide her legal education. It felt oddly liberating to speak openly in legalese, forging arguments a typical pro se litigant wouldn't know how to form. When Selina finally walked home under the glow of street lamps, she couldn't shake a sense of unease. Each step on the cracked sidewalk reminded her of the intimidation calls. She'd briefly considered moving to a hotel or staying with relatives, but her mother's declining health required stability. Besides, she wouldn't let them scare her from her home. Sure enough, as if summoned by her worries, a dark sedan sat idling near her building's entrance. She slowed, heart pounding. The windows were rolled up, concealing whoever sat inside. For a moment she was certain it was Everett's watchers, waiting to deliver another threat. But as she approached, the car revved and screeched off into the night, leaving her rattled in its wake. Upstairs, she found her mother napping on the couch with the TV softly humming. The table was strewn with medication bottles and hospital forms. Selina's chest tightened. This was the reality she was fighting for, to ensure her mother could receive the care she needed without them being forever strapped by bills. A large settlement would help with that, of course, but how much was she willing to trade for it? She knew the answer. Her integrity was not for sale. Softly, she woke her mother and helped her to bed, then sank into a chair, eyes burning from exhaustion. She reached for her phone to see if any urgent emails had come in. There was a new one from James Belden's office, titled Preliminary Settlement Discussion. confidential. Her stomach twisted. Clicking it open, she scanned the bullet points. The figure was more than double the original. The conditions, however, were painfully clear. Absolute confidentiality, no admission of wrongdoing by Everett, and a broad release from any further claims regarding harassment. She sighed, forwarding it to Anita for her opinion. It was exactly what she expected. A bigger hush money offer. She pictured the heartbreak on her mother's face if she explained they'd have to keep fighting, risking medical bills piling up. Then she recalled Everett's sneer and the knowledge that, if she settled quietly, how many more employees might he victimize? Closing her eyes, she tried to find calm. She thought back to the day she'd first realized her moral convictions wouldn't let her walk away. Even if she took this money, she'd always live with the knowledge that she'd let Everett's behavior go unchallenged in the public record. The cycle would continue. She had to break it. She typed a short reply, politely declining the terms and requesting a settlement free of NDAs or demands that she relinquish the right to speak publicly. Her finger hovered a second before hitting send. Then, with a decisive tap, it was done. She set the phone aside, ignoring her trembling nerves, and went to fix a cup of tea. Staring into the steaming mug, she acknowledged the weight of her decision. She was risking everything for the principle that no one had the right to treat people the way Everett had treated her, and likely countless others. Her mother deserved security. Yet how secure could life be if it was built on a lie? As she sipped her tea, the phone buzzed again. She glanced at it warily. Another blocked number. Just as she'd guessed, a text message read, "You're making a big mistake. Stop pushing." Her heart hammered, but she quietly deleted it. She would press forward, no matter the threats. Another hearing was set for next week. Nicole would soon be subpoenaed. The depositions would begin in 5 weeks. And if everything went according to plan, the truth would finally see the light. The days that followed were a swirl of phone calls, hurried meetings, and cautious hope. Selena found herself juggling multiple roles, from caretaker of her mother to part-time detective, digging through every lead she could uncover. As news of the lawsuit spread, more former Lumitech employees reached out to her discreetly, some by anonymous email, others through friends of friends. Several described a culture of intimidation that went far beyond harsh words. Raises withheld, projects suddenly reassigned, and rumors planted to smear anyone who complained. While their stories were harrowing, Selena recognized how valuable these voices could be. They could confirm that Everett's toxic tactics weren't confined to a single outburst, but part of a deeper pattern. Still, she worried that fear might stop many from testifying publicly. Determined to build a robust case, Selena drafted a list of potential witnesses. She mapped them out on color-coded index cards spread across her cramped living room floor. There was Gary, a quiet accountant who claimed his promotion vanished after he mentioned management's racial disparities in hiring. Marta, an administrative assistant forced to endure sexist remarks from visiting executives. And Deshawn, a security guard who overheard Everett bragging about crushing whistleblowers. Each story alone might seem minor, but when assembled like puzzle pieces, they revealed a corporate culture that thrived on intimidation. As she stared at the growing web of names, Selena felt a flicker of pride. This was the kind of research she'd learned to do in law school, though she never dreamed she'd one day use it to sue her own ex-employer. One afternoon, she managed to catch Nicole Rogers by phone, checking to confirm her willingness to testify. Nicole's voice carried both resolve and dread. She had read the newly filed motion, realized that depositions loomed, and recognized her name would inevitably surface. "I'm ready," she said quietly. "But you should know, my old HR supervisor just called, warning me to stay out of it. She even hinted that I could face a lawsuit for stealing confidential data." Selena's stomach clenched in sympathy. "They're desperate to silence you," she murmured. but the documents you have will reveal the truth. Don't let them scare you." Nicole said she wouldn't, yet Selena couldn't ignore the fatigue in her voice. This was the price of confronting power: sleepless nights, gnawing anxiety, and constant second-guessing. Outside of her legal crusade, Selena's life was still anchored by her mother's medical challenges. Almost daily, she had to deal with insurance forms, doctor visits, or calls from billing departments. Her mother, Grace Hammond, was a quiet woman who managed a brave smile whenever Selena returned home. She never pried into the details of the lawsuit, sensing the burden her daughter carried. Instead, she'd place a gently folded newspaper clipping with stories about Hammond versus Langford on the kitchen table, letting Selena know she was proud without speaking a word. Late at night, when exhaustion weighed on Selena's soul, she drew strength from seeing her mother asleep, comforted by the knowledge that no matter how daunting the battle, she wasn't alone in spirit. They were a family, bound together. Meanwhile, tensions around the case grew. Anonymous calls persisted. Sometimes her phone rang in the early hours, and she heard only static or faint breathing on the other end. She changed her number twice, but the harassment always returned. She logged every incident and forwarded them to Detective Abrams, who dutifully documented them. He believed, but couldn't prove, that associates of Everett were behind the intimidation. Even so, the phone calls were only half the story. Twice, Selena noticed a black SUV tailing her car when she went grocery shopping. She mentioned it to her mother, who insisted she stay safe, perhaps even step away from the case. "I can't," Selena answered gently. "If I back down now, they'll keep doing this to others." And that ended the debate. As the scheduled deposition period neared, Belden filed his protective order motion, accusing Selena of possessing unlawfully obtained material. Selena responded with a thorough brief explaining that Nicole Rogers's data was shared voluntarily by a concerned former employee, not stolen. She cited whistleblower protections and argued that restricting those documents would harm the public interest in exposing systemic workplace abuse. In the final pages, she invoked a principle dear to her heart: that courts exist to protect everyday citizens from the tyranny of wealth and power. Reading over her words before submission, she felt a flicker of the idealism she'd felt in law school. Win or lose, she was fighting for something bigger than a single settlement check. She was fighting for accountability, and, by extension, for her mother's dignity, too. Judge Fletcher set a hearing on the protective order for the following Monday. By that time, the local media had ramped up coverage. The station anchors spoke in astonished tones about how a once unknown janitor had refused settlement offers and forced a flamboyant billionaire into serious legal battles. Selena glimpsed one broadcast where a pundit asked, "Could this become a landmark case for workplace rights?" Another pointed out that Everett had faced lawsuits before, but never from someone so determined to go to trial. The speculation fueled public curiosity, and more voices trickled out of the shadows. A handful of employees from other companies that Everett controlled left cryptic messages for Selena, claiming they had also experienced harassment. The scale of it all threatened to overwhelm her. The night before the protective order hearing, Selena sat cross-legged on the living room floor, reviewing her notes as her mother dozed in a recliner nearby. In the hush, she heard her phone chime with an incoming text from an unknown number. "Your mother deserves peace. Accept the settlement and spare her this stress." The direct reference to her mother made her freeze. Her first instinct was panic. Then anger ignited. She refused to let these bullies weaponize her family. She fired back, "Harassing me won't work. This is my final warning. Stop." Then she blocked the number, her heart thudding, but inside she made a silent vow to speak to Detective Abrams again, to see if more could be done. She wouldn't allow them to manipulate her through fear. Morning dawned bright, and Selina returned to courtroom 9. The air was electric with tension. Belden arrived early, shoulders squared, an air of absolute confidence radiating from him. Alden trailed behind like a junior shadow. Once the judge took the bench, Belden launched into his argument, insisting that the disputed HR documents were private, protected under confidentiality agreements. He painted Nicole Rogers as a rogue employee who violated her legal obligations. Selina stood quietly, letting him finish. Then, in a measured voice, she explained how those very policies had been weaponized to silence legitimate complaints. If they hide behind confidentiality to protect harassment, the court has a moral and legal duty to intervene, she concluded. She watched the judge's eyes, searching for a hint of leaning. Judge Fletcher's expression remained carefully neutral. At the end of the hearing, the judge promised a written ruling soon. She cautioned both sides to refrain from sensationalizing the issue in the press. As Selina stepped out, Belden sidled up. "You're tenacious," he remarked almost admiringly. "But you must see how draining this will be for you and your family." Selina quietly glared. "Yes, it's draining, but the truth is worth it." For a moment, Belden looked as though he might say something more conciliatory. Then a phone call pulled him away. Outside, reporters swarmed, hungry for quotes. Selina said only that she trusted the court to weigh the facts. With each question, she repeated her commitment to seeing the lawsuit through. Slipping past the cameras, she felt her chest tighten from the tension of it all, but resolved to keep going until justice prevailed. A week later, the entire course of Selina's case seemed to teeter on a single decision. Judge Fletcher's ruling on the protective order arrived by courier in a crisp envelope, delivered to Selina's door at 8 in the morning. She opened it with trembling fingers while her mother rested in the next room, still recovering from an exhausting round of tests at the hospital. The court's letterhead was bold at the top, the typed pages only a few in number. Her eyes raced over the words. The judge had denied most of the defense's requests. She acknowledged Lumitech's right to protect certain proprietary secrets, trade data, client lists, but insisted that redactions could not be used to conceal harassment complaints or the identities of key witnesses. Critical paragraphs declared that Nicole Rogers' documents, if verified as authentic, could be used in open court. The final line cemented the judge's stance. The court will not allow confidentiality provisions to be misused as a shield against credible allegations of discriminatory behavior. Relief poured through Selina. This victory was huge, one that cleared the path for more transparent evidence in depositions. She felt a jolt of gratitude toward Judge Fletcher, who had resisted the pressure to keep corporate misdeeds under wraps. She scanned the letter again, half expecting to find hidden conditions, but everything seemed straightforward. With a trembling exhale, she tucked the papers into a file folder labeled Key Orders and sent a quick message to Nicole Rogers. "Protective order mostly denied. You're free to bring everything to the table." Next, she rang Anita Burgess, who answered on the second ring. "Got the ruling?" Anita asked, her tone brimming with cautious excitement. Selina detailed the highlights, and Anita let out a gleeful laugh. "This is the break you needed. Now depositions can move forward without them stonewalling everything." "That's gold. So what's your plan?" Selina thought quickly. "I'll finalize witness lists and send out subpoenas right away. Once we get folks under oath, we can confirm patterns of misconduct. If all goes well, the judge will see enough to push us toward trial, unless they back down." "They might try another settlement angle," Anita cautioned. "Expect them to dangle bigger money once they realize they can't hide the documents." Selina recognized the truth in that. She also knew that the harassment might escalate. But for the moment, she preferred to focus on the positive. For the first time, the law was solidly on her side. She called Detective Abrams about the ongoing threats, updated him, and forwarded the latest text messages from blocked numbers. The detective agreed to keep investigating, but warned her that the calls could be coming from disposable phones. Her best defense was vigilance. That afternoon, she spent hours emailing each prospective witness, some of whom she'd only spoken to fleetingly, others who had been in contact with Nicole Rogers. She typed carefully worded messages explaining they could now testify with less fear of a gag order. She promised that if they stepped forward, their voices would be heard in a formal deposition. A few replied swiftly, pledging support. Others admitted fear or simply asked for more time to decide. Selena understood. Speaking out could mean retaliation from future employers or from powerful allies of Everett. Still, she hoped the momentum would give them the courage to stand up. She also drafted a separate letter for Marta, the administrative assistant who alleged she'd been harassed. Marta was a single mother, terrified that crossing a billionaire might cost her everything. Selena's letter empathized with that terror, but underscored that the more people refused to be silenced, the weaker Everett's grip became. Each witness who bravely stepped forward would make it safer for the next. Selena sealed the envelope with care, praying Marta would find enough hope to join the fight. Just as the sun began to set, her mother shuffled out of the bedroom, leaning heavily on a cane. Selena jumped up to assist her. Grace managed a soft laugh. "I'm not as frail as you think, dear." But the shadows under her eyes told a different story. The day's test results had offered little clarity, just more appointments to schedule. Selena guided her to the couch. "Any news on your case?" Grace asked, resting her head on a cushion. Selena knelt by her side. "The judge ruled in our favor on the protective order. I can use those HR files, and depositions are a go." Grace's tired eyes brightened with a flicker of pride. "You always wanted to stand up for justice, even as a kid. Remember that time you staged a petition against the school's unfair grading policy? You were 10. She chuckled, coughing a bit. "I only hope it doesn't drain you too much." "It's a small price," Selena whispered, squeezing her mother's hand. "We'll get through this together. I promise I'm taking care of myself." Early the next morning, the doorbell rang. Selena peeked through the peephole. 2 uniformed men stood outside. Her pulse spiked, but she realized they were court officers with a stack of sealed envelopes. "Good morning, Ms. Hammond," one said politely. "We have the official scheduling orders for depositions." She signed for them, heart hammering. Each packet detailed a date, time, and location for depositions. The first half dozen were for minor Lumitech executives, possibly placed on the list by Belden to create a flurry of worthless testimony. The real test, of course, would come when they scheduled Everett's own deposition, as well as key HR personnel. But it was official now. In 2 weeks, everything would be set in motion. She rummaged through the pages. A footnote indicated that any changes must be requested within 3 days, or the schedule would be locked. With a determined nod, she placed calls to a local co-working center that rented private conference rooms. She couldn't afford a fancy law firm suite, but she could arrange a respectable setting for depositions. Using her own savings, which were dwindling at an alarming rate, she booked the space. It wasn't ideal, but it symbolized her readiness to meet them head-on. The next day brought a swirling mass of logistical details, emails to Belden, calls to potential witnesses confirming times, copies of documents to share in each deposition. She wondered how large corporations handled such tasks. Then she remembered they had entire teams of paralegals. She had only her wits and a few allies who volunteered small bits of help. Often she'd catch herself up at midnight, eyes burning, scanning labor statutes to ensure no detail slipped. In the background, her mother's soft breathing sometimes lulled her to doze at the dining table. But each dawn, she rose again, fueled by conviction. On the 3rd morning, a surprise arrived in the form of a letter from Belden's firm, a formal request to depose Nicole Rogers first. before any other witnesses. The letter dripped with professional courtesy, but Selina recognized the tactic. They wanted to grill Nicole, discredit her, and possibly tarnish the rest of the depositions by insinuating the entire case hinged on a disgruntled ex-employee. Selina weighed her options. She could refuse that order, citing the usual protocol that the plaintiff's side sets the general order of depositions. Yet if she fought too strenuously, it might look like she was hiding Nicole. In truth, Nicole was prepared, anxious, yes, but ready. So Selina responded in writing, consenting to Nicole's early deposition, but only if they also agreed that Everett's deposition would be scheduled promptly and not delayed indefinitely. She half expected them to balk. To her mild surprise, Belden wrote back with a short note, "Acceptable. We'll produce Mr. Langford on the date the court sets." Possibly, Belden realized that stalling only prolonged the risk of more damaging revelations. When Selina broke the news to Nicole, the poor woman's voice quivered slightly. "They're going to come after every detail of my life, my finances, my job history, everything." Selina's heart went out to her. "We'll prepare thoroughly. I'll be right there with you." She spent hours walking Nicole through the basics of a deposition, how the defense might try to rattle her, the necessity of calm honesty, the refusal to guess if she wasn't sure about a date or detail. "Just tell the truth," Selina reassured her. "You've got the documents to back it up. The more they push, the more they risk looking like bullies." Meanwhile, rumors swirled that Everett had quietly flown out of the country for business. He'd refused every media request to comment, letting Belden speak in broad denials. In the press, Belden repeated phrases like, "We look forward to presenting the full story," and "We have confidence the truth will vindicate Mr. Langford." Each time Selina read such statements, her anger simmered. She knew the truth. The depositions would finally reveal it to everyone else. On the eve of the first deposition, Selina stopped by the rented conference room to ensure everything was in order. Simple table, chairs, a decent microphone for recording, nothing fancy, but it would work. The sense of momentousness pressed upon her. She recalled how, just months ago, she'd been scrubbing floors in Everett's gleaming tower, invisible to the executives who breezed past. Now she was on the brink of forcing them to answer questions under oath, an unsettling shift in power dynamics. She whispered to herself, "You can do this," as she locked up. That night she polished her final outline for questioning Nicole. She planned to start with straightforward questions establishing Nicole's background, her time at Lumitech, her repeated concerns about harassment, and the reaction from higher-ups. She'd then address the crucial matter of how complaints got buried. The key was to stay calm, not let Belden's side derail the focus by painting Nicole as an embittered ex-employee. If they tried, Selina had the memos and the partially redacted files to corroborate her. Before bed, she brewed chamomile tea and carried a mug to her mother. Grace smiled, though her eyes reflected concern. "You're so brave," she whispered, "but be careful." Selina knelt beside her. "I promise. And after all this, maybe we can finally afford the better hospital." In that quiet exchange, mother and daughter found a moment of shared strength. Whatever the next day brought, whatever lawyers, intimidation, or legal traps, Selina would stand firm. The depositions would shine a light on Lumitech's darkest corners. And in that act of illumination, maybe she'd finally prove that no matter how powerful someone seemed, they couldn't buy impunity forever. The morning of Nicole's deposition arrived with a tense hush. Selina got to the rented conference room early, double-checking that the court reporter had set up her stenography machine and that the audio recorder was functioning properly. The room smelled faintly of fresh vacuuming and the whir of a wall-mounted AC unit. A couple of neutral paintings, generic landscapes, were the only decor on the beige walls. Nicole showed up next, shoulders bowed as if carrying a heavy pack. She wore a simple charcoal pantsuit, clasping a slim portfolio to her chest. Selina offered a reassuring smile. "You okay?" Nicole attempted a shaky grin. "I didn't sleep last night. Kept picturing them picking apart my life." Selina touched her elbow gently. "They'll try, but remember, you have the truth. That counts more than anything. Focus on what you know firsthand." Nicole nodded, taking a seat at the large table. Moments later, the door swung open, and James Belden glided in, impeccably dressed, followed by Zachary Alden and a young paralegal juggling files. They quickly set up at the opposite side of the table. Belden gave a crisp nod of acknowledgement. "Good morning, Ms. Hammond, Ms. Rogers." Nicole swallowed hard, returning the greeting. Selina took a seat beside her. The court reporter, a quiet woman in her 50s, positioned herself at one corner, fingers on the keys. With a nod, she confirmed they were ready to begin. Belden started by reading the standard deposition admonitions about recording, truthfulness, and the oath. Nicole placed her hand on a small Bible the court reporter provided, though some do not. "I do," she said softly. Then they launched in. "Please state your full name for the record," Belden asked in a formal tone. "Nicole Maria Rogers," she answered, voice quivering at first, then steadying. Belden led with seemingly benign questions: her educational background, her job history before Lumitech, how she came to be hired in HR. Nicole answered methodically. It was clear he wanted a baseline timeline of her career to potentially unearth inconsistencies. Then the questions turned toward the heart of the matter. "When did you first form the belief that Lumitech was covering up complaints of harassment, Ms. Rogers?" he asked, leaning forward. Nicole inhaled. "About a year after I started. Employees began confiding that their formal complaints were getting lost, that no one was following up. I investigated the system we used to log complaints and noticed certain entries were flagged for manual review. Those entries never reappeared in official reports." Belden's expression remained impassive. Why assume it was intentional concealment? Could it not be a glitch or an innocent reclassification? Nicole's gaze sharpened. "I questioned my supervisor. She told me it was a company directive to keep negative records away from the main database, especially those that hinted at discrimination. When I asked which executive had given that directive, she refused to say." Belden's pen scratched on his notepad. "So this is hearsay from an unnamed supervisor?" Nicole stiffened. "Yes, she didn't want to be named. She was afraid of retaliation." He smirked. "Fear, rumors, speculation, none of which prove an actual cover-up. Did you ever witness Mr. Langford himself instructing anyone to bury complaints?" Nicole paused, shooting Selina a look. Selina offered a subtle nod, encouraging her to speak the truth. "I was never in a meeting where he explicitly said, 'Cover this up.' But I did see documents referencing Mr. Langford's displeasure with certain employees who filed repeated complaints. And I witnessed my supervisor shred some printed reports after receiving phone calls from Mr. Langford's administrative aide." Belden latched on. "Which aide? Name, please." Nicole bit her lip. "Janice Kendall. She was a sort of gatekeeper for him." He jotted notes. "Did Ms. Kendall ever say Mr. Langford personally ordered that shredding?" "No, but she said something like, 'He wants this handled quietly. Don't let it escalate.'" The context was always harassment complaints. Belden's tone grew more pointed. "So again, you never heard Mr. Langford say he wanted complaints buried. You just inferred." Nicole took a breath. "Yes, that's my inference based on consistent patterns. Over time, it happened multiple times with multiple employees. It felt like a well-practiced method, not a one-off misunderstanding." His questions kept drilling at potential ambiguities, trying to emphasize the lack of direct instruction from Everett himself. He asked about Nicole's own performance reviews. Was she disgruntled? She calmly recounted how her reviews had been excellent until she began poking around these complaints. After that, she was labeled disruptive. Then Belden pivoted to the flash drive. You allegedly copied internal HR files. That's theft of company property, wouldn't you agree? Nicole's hands shook. I disagree. I preserved evidence of illegal conduct, as permitted under whistleblower statutes. Belden's eyes narrowed. Are you aware Lumitech policy strictly forbade removing confidential data from the premises? I'm aware of the policy. I also know it had an exception for evidence of unlawful practices. I was advised by an attorney that whistleblowers can act to preserve records. He pressed on. Which attorney? Did Ms. Hammond instruct you? Nicole shook her head. No. I consulted an outside attorney months after I left. Ms. Hammond had nothing to do with it. Belden flipped pages in a folder, then adjusted his tie. Very well, let's discuss the specifics of these HR documents. On certain forms, you claim references to Mr. Langford or other executives were redacted internally. Did you personally see the original text before redactions? Nicole nodded. Yes, in the early versions of the database entries. So you can confirm the text that mentioned Mr. Langford by name? Yes. He leaned back. Ms. Rogers, you're aware that forging or falsifying company documents to implicate an innocent party is a serious crime, correct? Her voice wavered but held. I didn't falsify anything. Belden let the question hang, planting suspicion. Then, after a pause, he said, That'll be all for now. Selina used the chance to question Nicole from her own side. She guided her through more detailed accounts of repeated patterns. Employees complaining about Everett's racial slurs or belittling language and finding themselves demoted or transferred. Nicole described the frustration of powerless HR staff, the climate of fear. She recounted one incident in which an employee, a middle-aged black man, filed a complaint stating Everett called him an ungrateful charity case. Nicole typed that complaint herself. When she followed up, she discovered it was nowhere in the final system reports. Nicole's voice gathered strength as she spoke. I told my supervisor, this is serious discrimination. She told me, you're new here. Learn to keep your mouth shut. When Nicole finished, Selina glanced at Belden, who scribbled a note, then shook his head. We'll continue at a later date if needed, he said curtly. The official deposition concluded. As the court reporter packed up, Nicole exhaled shakily. Selina placed a hand on her arm, whispering, You did great. Belden and Alden gathered their materials without meeting Selina's eyes, then left, the paralegal scurrying behind. In the hallway, Nicole's entire frame trembled. Oh my God, it felt like an interrogation. That's exactly what a deposition is, Selina said gently, guiding her out of the conference room. But you held your own. Their biggest angle was to imply your disgruntled or forged documents. You stood firm. Nicole nodded faintly, relief warring with lingering anxiety. I hope the judge sees through their smears. She will, Selina assured her. You've spoken your truth under oath, and we have the files to support it. They parted ways, and Selina stayed behind a bit, debriefing with the court reporter about scheduling the next depositions. Then she gathered her own notes, her mind thrumming with the day's events. Yes, Nicole had been forced to admit she never heard Everett specifically order a cover-up, but she still painted a damning portrait of systematic concealment. Combined with other witnesses, it might form a comprehensive mosaic of corporate wrongdoing. By late afternoon, Selina stepped out into a balmy evening. The sky glowed pink above the city skyline. She checked her phone. No new voicemails from her mother's doctors. A mild reassurance. However, a text from Detective Abrams awaited. Another call from unknown number, same MO. Let me know if there's more. Stay safe. Sighing, Selena realized how accustomed she'd become to threats lurking at the edge of her awareness. It was like living under a dark cloud. But the day's deposition brought her a small sense of triumph. One battle down, many to go. The next week was a conveyor belt of depositions from mid-level managers who offered vague statements about Mr. Langford's intensity and high standards. Some admitted he had a temper, others claimed ignorance of any racial bias. Selena sensed a coordinated effort to paint Everett as demanding but fair. After each session, Belden showed that same polite, inscrutable face. He hinted that none of these depositions proved real misconduct. Selena calmly reminded him this was only the beginning. Then, at a midweek hearing, Judge Fletcher addressed a scheduling conflict. She also inquired, "Has Mr. Langford been deposed yet?" Belden glanced at Selena. "We're arranging his availability, Your Honor. He's traveling on business." Selena felt a flicker of frustration. "We agreed in writing that Mr. Langford would appear by the end of this month. We're quickly approaching that deadline." The judge nodded. "I expect him to comply, Mr. Belden. If he's evading deposition, I can compel his appearance." Belden promised cooperation, but his tight smile suggested Everett wasn't thrilled about sitting in a room answering Selena's questions. Selena, on the other hand, couldn't wait. If she could ask him directly about the alleged slurs, the retaliation, and how complaints vanished, he might slip and reveal the arrogance that fueled it all. That night, she returned home to find her mother dozing in the recliner, the soft hum of the TV in the background. She gently kissed Grace's forehead, then sank onto the couch, thinking about the depositions still ahead. She had 5 more managers scheduled, plus a few administrative assistants who might confirm Everett's personal involvement. Each new testimony carried a chance for truth and a risk of contradiction. Tomorrow's session included a key witness, the accountant Gary, who'd confided about his lost promotion. If his story aligned with Nicole's depiction of secret directive from above, the cumulative effect might be impossible for Everett to dodge. Selena's heart thrummed at the thought. Just a little more evidence, a little more courage from those who'd been wronged, and the full picture would come into focus. She brewed a cup of tea and sat in silence, letting the day's tension drift off. All her life, people in power had taught her, sometimes gently, sometimes harshly, that she should know her place and avoid rocking the boat. Now she was doing more than rocking. She was turning the tide. And if Everett Langford thought he could scare her into quitting, he would learn otherwise soon enough. 4 days later, the entire atmosphere around the case changed with one simple sentence. "Mr. Langford will be appearing for deposition on Friday." That statement, tucked into a late-night email from James Belden, shot through Selena like an electric current. At last, the man she'd once scrubbed floors beneath would have to face questions, not in a polished boardroom where he was king, but under oath in a neutral conference setting. She tried to keep her hopes realistic. Everett was notorious for his poise under pressure, and she expected him to deflect, deny, or spin. But still, getting him in the hot seat felt like a milestone. On Friday morning, Selena arrived at the same rented suite she'd used for the other depositions. She'd arranged a second recorder as a backup, just in case. A chill of anticipation rippled through her. She reviewed her notes on the testimonies so far, marking each point she planned to press. The vanished complaints, the insults, the alleged slurs. Though a lawyer by training, she'd never actually taken a deposition this critical. The old nerves fluttered in her stomach, but she reminded herself she knew these facts inside and out. No million-dollar defense strategy could overshadow the truth. Belden and Alden arrived at precisely 9. They exchanged quiet words with the court reporter, then set out neatly stacked files on the table. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and Everett Langford swept in. He wore a crisp navy suit that fit his tall frame perfectly, hair combed just so, and the faintest hint of cologne that probably cost more than Selina's monthly rent. His expression was carefully neutral, a mask of self-assured power. She felt a mixture of anger and satisfaction at the sight. Everett made no move to greet her. Instead, he turned to Belden. "Let's get this over with," he murmured loud enough for everyone to hear. Then he took his seat across the table, facing Selina. She sat upright, ignoring his unspoken challenge. The court reporter reminded them all of the rules, had Everett swear to tell the truth, and positioned her hands over the stenograph. Then Selina began. "State your full name for the record." "Everett Alcott Langford," he said in a clipped tone. She flipped open her folder. "Mr. Langford, how long have you served as CEO of Lumitech Industries?" He clasped his hands on the table. 12 years. Before that, you were president of operations, correct?" "Yes." "During your tenure, have you ever been the subject of a formal harassment complaint within the company?" His brow furrowed. "Not to my knowledge. I run a strict but fair operation. Anyone complaining about me personally would be lying or misunderstanding the intensity of corporate culture." Selina made a note. "Did you ever refer to an employee, in words or in substance, as an ungrateful charity case?" His jaw tightened. "No, never." "Are you aware of any employee who alleged you used that phrase?" He snorted. "I've heard rumors. It's baseless." She pulled out a sheet of paper. "I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 12. This is a partially redacted HR complaint we later obtained in unredacted form. It states that you used the phrase with an employee named Robert Green. Are you saying Mr. Green lied?" Everett's gaze flicked to the document. "Yes, I am. Mr. Green was terminated for poor performance. If he said that, he fabricated it to tarnish my reputation." Selina leaned forward. "It wasn't just Mr. Green. We have another complaint from a different employee, similarly describing you using racially charged language. Did they all fabricate it?" He shrugged. "They must have, or they misunderstood something." Belden cleared his throat. "Objection to the form. Compound question, but answer if you can." Everett smirked. "I stand by my statement." Selina continued, systematically referencing each complaint that involved him directly. Some confirmed by Nicole Rogers, others by various ex-staffers. Everett denied them all. He insisted that if employees felt disrespected, it was due to their own sensitivities, not his words. He trotted out the idea that this generation was too soft for the rigors of big business. More than once she caught a slight condescending curl on his lips whenever she pressed on the racial aspect. "Mr. Langford," she asked at one juncture, "were you aware that numerous employees left the company citing hostile treatment specifically toward black staff?" He scoffed. "Hostile treatment? No. Some people couldn't keep up with Lumitech's standards. Race had nothing to do with it. And yet your HR system recorded a disproportionate number of complaints from black employees. How do you explain that disparity?" He waved a hand. "Coincidence or incompetence. Maybe those individuals performed poorly and used accusations to deflect from their own failings." Selina held his gaze. "Are you suggesting that black employees were more likely to be incompetent?" Belden cut in. "Objection mischaracterizes the witness's statement." Everett allowed himself a smug grin. "I said nothing of the sort. I said those who made accusations might have been incompetent. Race is irrelevant." Selina suppressed a surge of anger. "Let's move on. Do you recall the day you terminated me, Mr. Langford?" His eyes flickered with mild amusement. "Yes. You were cleaning near my office. Loitering, really. You'd apparently overheard a private conversation that you misinterpreted. I fired you for being intrusive and rude." She arched an eyebrow. Did you use any particular language to describe me that day? No, he said flatly. I simply explained that you were unprofessional and not needed in my building. She took a measured breath. So you deny calling me lazy, incompetent, and an expletive I'd rather not repeat here? His gaze hardened. I do deny that. You're making up stories to bolster this frivolous lawsuit. Selina tapped her pen. We'll see. She flipped to a new page. Do you have any recollection of threatening me about discussing anything I might have overheard? I simply reminded you not to violate company confidentiality, he said, almost yawning. That's standard protocol. So you didn't tell me I would regret it if I tried to spread lies. I did not. He offered a cool smile. Bit by bit, she picked through each allegation, from calling employees slurs to burying HR complaints. Everett shot them down with mechanical precision, always insisting someone else must have twisted his words. Yet the more he denied, the more Selina saw the cracks beneath the surface. His tone was too dismissive. For someone who claimed innocence, he was unflinchingly angry. Nearing the deposition's end, Selina took a breath and addressed one final matter. Mr. Langford, have you ever directed any subordinate to remove or shred documented complaints against you? He barked a laugh. Of course not. That's absurd. I don't micromanage HR. So if HR files were shredded, it had nothing to do with your orders? He lifted his chin. Correct. I run a legitimate business. And let me be clear, Ms. Hammond. I find it appalling that you continue to slander me with baseless accusations. She pressed her lips together. I'm simply asking questions, Mr. Langford, under oath. He glanced at his watch. Are we done? Belden cleared his throat. I believe so, unless Ms. Hammond has more questions. He sounded wary. Selina felt she'd covered the core issues. No more at this time. With that, the court reporter ended the session, and the room exhaled. Everett stood abruptly, smoothing his suit jacket. He cast a single withering look at Selina. This will cost you dearly, he muttered in a low voice, audible only to her. Then he brushed past, leaving Belden and Alden to gather their belongings. Once alone with the court reporter, Selina's heart hammered. She recognized Everett's parting words for the threat they were. She asked the reporter if she'd caught that. She shrugged apologetically. I was off the record, sorry. Selina forced a wry smile. It's fine. That's his style. She walked outside into the hallway, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. Despite his cool denials, she felt a small thrill. He'd appeared visibly rattled at times. That was a start. Within minutes, the entire entourage departed, leaving Selina alone in the corridor with a swirl of emotions. She noticed DeMarcus Fong lurking by the elevator and ambled over. Well, how'd it go? He asked, eyes gleaming with curiosity. She hesitated. I can't share details of the deposition, but let's just say Mr. Langford was defensive. DeMarcus smirked. A secure man with nothing to hide doesn't usually bristle that much. This is getting interesting. Word on the street is he's doubling down on a smear campaign against you, saying you're an opportunist, a liar. Anger simmered. Of course he is. That's his tactic. Discredit the accuser, but facts speak louder than spin. Once we get to trial, I'll let the evidence speak. He nodded, scribbling in his notepad. Sure, just watch your back, Selina. Powerful people get desperate when cornered. She thanked him, stepping into the elevator. As she rode down, she recalled Everett's final warning, the callous confidence in his eyes. He might have sealed deals with governments, outmaneuvered bigger opponents, and buried countless smaller scandals over the years. But she was determined to be the exception to that rule. Back at home, she found her mother asleep in front of the TV, soft music playing. Carefully, she draped a blanket over Grace's knees, then retreated to her makeshift office, really just a corner of the living room with a folding table. She rechecked her notes from the deposition. Everett had denied every specific allegation, but his repeated reliance on blanket denials might look suspicious to a jury when matched against multiple witnesses saying otherwise. She sent a quick text to Anita. "Depot done. Denied everything. He's pissed." "Next step?" Anita replied almost instantly. "Summaries. Chart his statements versus the evidence. Build your cross-ex for trial. Keep digging for corroboration." Selena stared at her phone. She realized trial might still be months away, assuming Everett didn't find a way to derail the suit. But the path grew clearer. Soon they'd have enough depositions to either push for a settlement on her terms, no hush clauses, or stand confidently before a jury. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a blocked number. Tensing, she considered ignoring it, but then she answered, wanting to see if it was more of Everett's intimidation. Silence for a beat, then a muffled voice hissed, "You'll regret humiliating him." A click followed. Setting her phone aside, Selena inhaled a slow breath. Fear twisted her insides, but it also stoked her resolve. They were trying the same old tactics to frighten her into dropping the case. Too late, she thought. They'd awakened a fight in her that wouldn't be quieted. The next few weeks passed in a blur of discovery battles, strategic meetings, and mounting tension. Selena found herself juggling not only the depositions but a slew of pretrial motions from Everett's legal team, each seemingly crafted to slow her momentum. They challenged the relevance of certain witnesses, questioned the chain of custody for Nicole's files yet again, and peppered her with subpoenas for her own personal records. Overnight, it felt as though her entire life was under scrutiny. Every bank statement, every social media post, every detail of her short tenure at Lumitech. She refused to let it rattle her, though at times she felt the toll in her weary bones. Her mother's health weighed heavily on her as well. Several nights, Selena came home to find Grace struggling for breath or wincing with pain. They made more frequent hospital visits, and each trip drained their finances further. A settlement might have soothed those burdens, but Selena remained adamant. She'd only accept one that let her speak publicly. More hush money offers trickled in, some through official channels, others rumored from unnamed intermediaries. Each time she sent a swift reply that her integrity was not for sale. She'd come too far to hide the truth now. Meanwhile, the depositions continued. One after another, ex-employees recounted stories of being berated, demoted, or quietly forced out after encountering Everett's wrath. A pattern emerged. He never seemed to admit wrongdoing, always shifting blame, always leaning on subordinates to handle the fallout. Though none could claim to have overheard him explicitly ordering them to shred evidence, they described a climate of fear where such requests didn't need direct words. Everyone knew complaining meant risking their livelihood. Each piece fed into the mosaic of intimidation Selena was building for trial. When it came time to depose a mid-level executive named Sharon Klein, the proceedings turned unexpectedly dramatic. Sharon had worked at Lumitech for a decade, climbing the ranks despite an obvious tension with certain higher-ups. Selena vaguely recalled seeing her stride through corridors with a purposeful expression, always checking her phone. The official word was that Sharon left the company amicably, but the rumor was she'd been pushed out after disagreeing with Everett on diversity initiatives. If her testimony matched the rumor, it might be explosive. Sharon arrived at the conference room wearing a neat blazer and an air of uneasy resolve. Within minutes, Belden was firing off pointed questions, demanding to know if Sharon had any personal vendetta against Everett. She coolly denied it, but admitted that she opposed the dismissive way he handled repeated complaints from minority employees. Then Selena took her turn, carefully guiding Sharon to recount a certain meeting from 2 years prior. "I remember sitting in on a leadership session," Sharon said. voice steady. A group of us suggested efforts to address the low retention rate among black employees. Mr. Langford called it unnecessary pandering. He said something like, "If they can't survive the environment, that's their problem." Selena's pulse quickened. Did he say anything more specific about those employees? Sharon bit her lip. He made a comment that they should be grateful to be hired in the first place. That stuck with me because it implied they didn't deserve to be there on merit. Belden leaned forward with an objection, but Selena calmly rephrased. Sharon repeated that Everett viewed minority staff as unworthy of special treatment. The message was clear. His disregard ran deeper than an offhand insult. It was a fixed mindset that left no room for addressing discrimination. Belden tried to undermine Sharon's credibility, pointing out she'd been laid off shortly after. She responded that she'd received a severance with a standard non-disclosure clause but decided to speak up now, feeling the truth needed to be aired. Selena admired her courage. Sharon's statements, combined with Nicole's, offered a chilling portrait of corporate indifference. After the deposition, Sharon lingered in the hallway, looking drained. Selena approached. "Thank you," she said softly. "I know that took a lot." Sharon exhaled. "I can't pretend it didn't happen. Too many good people left in tears. You're doing something remarkable here, Ms. Hammond. Don't let them bully you." They exchanged quick smiles before Sharon headed out. Selena replayed the testimony in her mind, excitement stirring. The evidence was piling high. If Everett's side hoped to crush her under an avalanche of motions, they were failing. She pressed on, finalizing the witness list for trial. Judge Fletcher had set a tentative date 2 months away, pending any unforeseen delays. That gave each side time to finalize depositions, gather expert testimony if needed, and file summary judgment motions. Selena suspected the defense might move for summary judgment, claiming she had insufficient evidence of direct wrongdoing, but she wasn't worried. The depositions spoke volumes. At home that evening, Selena found a letter in her mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper typed in bold letters, "Drop the case or your mother suffers." Fury surged through her. She snapped a photo, sent it to Detective Abrams, then locked her door. Her mother, half asleep on the couch, frowned when Selena explained. "I don't want you in danger," Grace murmured. "Maybe it's time to—" "No," Selena interrupted gently. "They're trying to scare us. If I quit now, they'll keep tormenting people. I can't let that happen." Her mother's worried gaze lingered, but she didn't argue further. Selena spent the next hour drafting a statement of the harassment for the detective, detailing everything from phone calls to letters. She refused to cower. Days turned into nights of relentless work. Anita Burgess helped with legal research after hours, offering moral support. Nicole Rogers called periodically with updates about other ex-HR colleagues who might be willing to testify. Selena trudged onward, fueled by the knowledge that every hearing brought her closer to unveiling the truth. But the weight on her shoulders felt heavier with each new threat. Finally, the morning of the defense's anticipated summary judgment motion arrived. Selena walked into courtroom 11. Judge Fletcher had reassigned them to a larger space to accommodate the press, carrying a binder filled with evidence. Everett was again absent. Belden and Alden represented him, flanked by 2 more associates. Their arguments boiled down to one central claim. Ms. Hammond cannot prove direct causation between her allegations and any tangible harm. The environment she describes is anecdotal, lacking formal proof of Mr. Langford's personal wrongdoing. Selena waited patiently, then stood to respond. She flipped through depositions. "We have multiple witnesses stating that Mr. Langford used derogatory language, threatened staff, and fostered a corporate policy of burying complaints. This meets the standard for a hostile work environment claim. As for tangible harm, I was fired, and many others were forced to resign under duress. The pattern is clear. Belden tried to spin it, pointing to the lack of a smoking gun memo where Everett explicitly said, "Fire them for being black." But Selina hammered home that discrimination cases rarely come with blatant confessions. They hinge on patterns, repeated testimonies, corroborating data. It was discrimination by insidious design, not a single memo. Judge Fletcher asked a few pointed questions, then said she'd issue a ruling shortly. That afternoon, the ruling came via electronic docket. Motion for summary judgment denied. Trial would proceed as scheduled. Selina nearly collapsed with relief. It wasn't over, but this was a vital milestone. The defense could no longer short-circuit her case. They'd have to face her in court. Later that week, a hush settled over the legal community as the trial date loomed. Journalists speculated that Everett might attempt a last-minute settlement. Selina half expected Belden to appear with an astronomical figure. Indeed, her phone rang with a call from Belden one evening. She picked up warily, bracing for the pitch. "Ms. Hammond," he began, "our client is prepared to offer a substantial settlement in exchange for dismissing the suit. We're talking a number in the 7 figures." His tone was measured. Selina closed her eyes, picturing the sum that could solve all her mother's medical expenses. "Does that come with an NDA?" "Of course," he replied softly. "We can't have damaging allegations swirl in perpetuity." She drew a shaky breath. "Then it's no deal. I want the ability to speak, to inform the public that what he did was wrong." Belden sounded genuinely stunned. "Would you at least consider—" "I have considered. My answer stands," she said. "If Mr. Langford wants to settle publicly, including an admission of wrongdoing and 0 gag clauses, I'll listen. Otherwise, see you in court." She hung up, tears burning in her eyes. 7 figures would change her life forever, but it wouldn't change what Everett had done, or the countless employees who'd suffered. She wouldn't betray their courage. Moments later, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Foolish. You'll pay for this." She gripped the device, fury coursing through her. They could threaten all they wanted. She was done living in fear. Time ticked closer to trial. Selina sharpened her witness list, finalizing the order in which each person would testify. Nicole Rogers, Sharon Klein, Gary the accountant, Marta the administrative assistant. Each had their role in painting the broader picture of systematic abuse. In a show of solidarity, some of them banded together, forming a small support group that met one evening to rehearse their testimonies and fortify their courage. Selina joined them, feeling overwhelmed by their trust in her. She promised to do everything in her power to ensure their voices were heard. Meanwhile, the stress weighed on Grace's health. On a Wednesday night, she experienced a sharp downturn, requiring an ambulance ride to the hospital. Selina spent hours by her bedside, the beep of the monitors a painful counterpoint to legal briefs stacked in her lap. She held her mother's hand, refusing to let guilt consume her. This fight was for them both. If they endured, maybe the victory would mean a safer future for all. And if the worst happened, Selina swallowed that thought. She refused to believe her mother wouldn't see the final outcome. As the trial date neared, the entire city seemed to brace for a confrontation unlike any in recent memory. A cleaning staff turned pro-se litigant, challenging a billionaire in open court, with allegations that touched on power, race, and corporate culture. Selina stood on the precipice, aware that the final chapter lay just ahead. For better or worse, she was ready to see this through to the verdict. The trial began on a bright Monday morning, drawing a crowd that spilled into the courthouse lobby. From aspiring law students to veteran reporters, everyone seemed to sense a landmark moment unfolding. A legal showdown pitting billionaire Everett Langford against Selina Hammond, once a humble cleaner in his corporate tower. Judge Fletcher presided in a larger courtroom than usual, accommodating rows of spectators who craned their necks for a glimpse of the plaintiff, whose tenacity had already become local legend. Selina felt the buzz of anticipation, but her mind stayed on a single focus: unveiling the truth before 12 jurors who would decide if money and status could excuse cruelty. Jury selection took 2 full days, with both sides probing potential jurors' attitudes on workplace discrimination and corporate power. Belden, leading the defense, struck those he deemed too sympathetic to employees, while Selina used her own limited strikes to exclude jurors who openly lauded tough leadership without acknowledging the possibility of abuse. Eventually, they settled on a diverse panel of 10 women and 2 men. Selina studied their faces, wondering if they would see through Everett's polished veneer and believe the testimonies of those he had belittled and silenced. Then came opening statements. Belden went first, standing tall in his immaculate suit. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he intoned, "Ms. Hammond alleges a toxic work environment, but she has no direct evidence of Mr. Langford ordering any wrongdoing. She's built a story from rumor and disgruntled ex-employees. You'll find the reality far simpler. She was fired for cause, and now she wants a payday." He ended by describing Everett as a driven entrepreneur whose intensity might be misunderstood, insisting it never crossed into discrimination. Several jurors took notes with grave attention. Selina rose when it was her turn, nerves pulsing in her stomach. Yet as she surveyed the room, a calm resolve settled over her. Everett Langford created a culture where complaints disappeared and voices of minority employees were ignored or punished, she said evenly. "You'll hear from men and women who risked their livelihoods to speak up. Their stories aren't rumor. They're real experiences that reveal a pattern of intimidation. You'll see documents that vanished from official records, only to resurface through whistleblowers. This case isn't about seeking revenge or a fortune. It's about accountability and ensuring that no one, no matter how wealthy, is above the law." She ended with a soft "thank you," aware of the hushed tension enveloping the courtroom. The plaintiff's witnesses came first. Nicole Rogers testified again, but this time before the jury, detailing her discovery of shredded complaints and instructions from supervisors to handle issues quietly. She remained composed under Belden's cross-examination, insisting that her only motivation was to expose wrongdoing, not sabotage the company. Sharon Klein described management meetings in which Everett brushed off diversity concerns and demanded hush-hush solutions for staff who complained. Gary, the accountant, recounted how his promotion vanished after he filed a grievance about racially charged remarks. Each testimony underscored a consistent narrative: that under Everett's leadership, employees of color were dismissed as complainers, forced out, or gaslit into believing they were the problem. Belden fought back with careful tactics. He noted small inconsistencies in dates or exact phrasing. He presented glowing performance evaluations for Everett, painting him as a results-oriented executive. But the more he probed, the more it appeared that the alleged inconsistencies came from normal lapses in memory rather than lies. Meanwhile, multiple witnesses recounted the same humiliating tone Everett took, the same fear of retribution if they persisted in speaking up. Selina observed the jury's reactions. Some faces showed shock, others a guarded neutrality. She hoped they sensed the courage these witnesses displayed by testifying so publicly. Midway through the plaintiff's case, Selina herself took the stand. She recounted the day Everett fired her, voice trembling as she repeated the ugly words he'd used. She admitted she'd been desperate for money to pay her mother's medical bills and had only taken a cleaning job to stay afloat while preparing for the bar exam. "I did nothing wrong," she told the jurors, forcing back tears. "I worked hard, tried to keep to myself, but one day I overheard him planning unethical acts. The minute he realized I wasn't just a silent bystander, he humiliated me in front of other executives. He hurled insults I'd never forget, then threatened I'd regret it if I ever spoke out. On cross-examination, Belden tried to discredit her. "You claim to have a law degree, but you were cleaning floors. Mightn't that suggest you weren't telling the truth about your qualifications?" She answered calmly, explaining her financial struggles, her mother's health, and her choice to do honest work rather than sink deeper into debt. Belden pressed further, hinting that her entire case was a ruse to extort money. She refused to waver. The jury watched intently, some with sympathetic expressions. Finally, it came time for the defense to present. Everett took the stand with a poised demeanor, emphasizing his philanthropic contributions and the success he'd brought to Lumitech. He denied every accusation, contending that employees who claimed harassment were either resentful or had performance issues. He insisted Nicole Rogers acted alone in stealing documents, that no executive directed her to shred anything. He painted Selena as someone who had misunderstood a private conversation, then invented vile language to bolster her lawsuit. His tone was smooth, but hints of arrogance crept in whenever he was challenged. On cross-examination, Selena questioned him directly, referencing the depositions. "Mr. Langford," she asked, "why did so many employees in separate incidents all allege similar insults and intimidation? Are they all lying, or is there another explanation?" He repeated that they were mistaken or lying. She pressed about the HR logs Nicole had uncovered, and he shrugged them off as errors. The longer he testified, the more the jury saw the dismissive posture he adopted. One juror's brow furrowed. Another began scribbling faster. Selena prayed they recognized his evasions for what they were. After 2 grueling weeks of testimony, both sides delivered closing arguments. Belden's message focused on the absence of a single silver bullet document, confirming a corporate conspiracy. Selena countered that discrimination cases seldom feature obvious confessions. Instead, she urged the jury to weigh the sheer number of consistent, independent witnesses, along with the underhanded attempts to conceal data. "Ask yourselves," she concluded, "if any of us could gather so many separate stories if they weren't rooted in truth. Ask yourselves if Mr. Langford's repeated denials ring genuine when so many voices say otherwise." Then came the wait. The jury deliberated for 2 full days, tension pressing like a vice on everyone involved. Selena spent restless hours at her mother's bedside, checking her phone anxiously. Each call from Anita sparked a jolt of hope or dread. Finally, a bailiff texted them, "Verdict reached." Selena hurried to the hospital cafeteria to share the news with Grace, whose face lit with fragile optimism. "Go, child," she whispered. "Win this." In the packed courtroom, the clerk read the verdict. It was in Selena's favor on the main counts: hostile work environment and wrongful termination. They found Everett had fostered a corporate atmosphere that stifled complaints and disproportionately harmed minority workers, culminating in Selena's termination once she threatened to expose his misdeeds. The jury awarded her damages substantial enough to cover her mother's medical bills, and then some. Gasps and murmurs filled the rows of spectators. Selena's legs nearly gave out with relief. She caught Belden's stony expression and saw Everett flush with outrage. As reporters scrambled for reactions, Judge Fletcher thanked the jury and concluded the proceedings, reminding all present that justice demanded humility, even from the powerful. Selena's phone buzzed non-stop with messages of congratulations. Outside, cameras flashed, and she managed a brief statement. "This verdict is for every worker who felt voiceless. It shows that standing up to power can bring change." She rushed to the hospital to share the news with her mother, tears streaming down her cheeks. Grace, pale and exhausted, reached out to squeeze Selena's hand. "You did it," she whispered, her voice quavering. "I'm so proud." In that moment, the swirl of attention and the grandeur of the verdict faded, replaced by gratitude for what truly mattered. Of course, Everett appealed almost immediately, vowing to fight the judgment with fresh motions. But the tide had turned. Public sentiment was against him, and more employees stepped forward to discuss possible class actions for repeated harassment at his other companies. Nicole Rogers and the other witnesses felt emboldened, talking openly about the abuses they'd endured. Media outlets highlighted Selena's journey from a cleaning cart to a plaintiff's counsel table, praising her for proving that courage and conviction could stand firm against wealth. Selena used part of the awarded sum for her mother's treatments, settling overdue medical bills, and ensuring better long-term care. Then she set aside a portion to finally complete the bar exam process. With Anita's help, she aimed to open a small practice dedicated to employment rights. While the stress had left her exhausted, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had seen how swiftly people could be crushed under tyranny when no one spoke out. Now she intended to be a voice for them. Standing outside the hospital on a crisp evening, she inhaled the cool air and gazed at the lights across the city skyline. Memory carried her back to the day she first donned that janitorial uniform, thinking she'd remain invisible just long enough to pay her debts. She'd never guessed she would one day hold a courtroom enthralled, or that she would bring a billionaire to account for his misdeeds. A faint smile crossed her face. The path had been harrowing, yet it reminded her that justice might be elusive, but not impossible to grasp. With her mother resting and victory at hand, Selena turned to face the future. A single case couldn't fix everything, but it had exposed a hidden cruelty. Perhaps others would see that they too could step forward, refusing to be silenced by money or threats. And maybe in time, all those small acts of bravery would gather momentum, forging a world where no one would ever again be mocked, threatened, or dismissed because of who they were. That hope, more than any verdict, was the triumph she carried in her heart.